Hello and a warm welcome to everyone. Today is the 5th installment of our podcast, The Way Forward. I'm Madeline, your host. My co-host Christiane will be joining us again in a near future episode. But for now, it's just you and me. Except when I say you and me, I mean both of you and both of me. I hope you'll stay for a fascinating look at the human brain and how we form our sense of who we are, our sense of self. Let's get started. In our first episode, I introduced the term ego to explain how we consciously perceive who we are as part of our identity in relation to the world around us. I stressed consciously because our conscious thoughts make up only about 5% of all our mental processes. The other 95% is taking place beyond our awareness. Now, I should add a clarification here. The term ego was introduced a century ago by neurologist Dr. Sigmund Freud as part of a framework for understanding levels of human consciousness. And even though the term ego is used less in the modern academic study of psychology, suffice to say, it is still very much a part of our modern language that we tend to use interchangeably with our conscious awareness of who we believe we are. To get started in today's topic, let's first look at the major components that form the self. In this slide, we see self-concept. Who am I? This is the most important aspect of your sense of self because, well, you are at the very center of your world. Your self-concept includes beliefs and core values by which you define yourself. Now, in a healthy individual, this is adaptive to a variety of social contexts, but remains at its core consistent, which leads to another aspect, the social self. Through social comparisons, we become conscious of how we differ from others. Our group memberships, including our families, friends, peers, and both cultural groups and faith-based affiliations. Well, these set standards that help us to define and evaluate our beliefs and our performances. And when others judge us favorably, we tend to think well of ourselves. Then there is our self-esteem, or sense of self-worth, how we rate ourselves across a variety of domains such as our morals, our abilities, skills, talents, and so on. Finally, we have self-knowledge. To know thyself is what we strive for. We form beliefs about ourselves to explain our emotions and our behaviors, why we feel and act certain ways. We have our consciously controlled attitudes about ourselves, but we also have attitudes that escape our conscious awareness, which help to form our internal scripts or sets of behaviors that are automatic and unself-aware. Now, there's a catch here, though, because our inside information about ourselves is often inaccurate. Now, I want to bring up something important here concerning adolescence. This is a tumultuous time when young ones are attempting to clearly define themselves, largely through attachment to their social groups. In episode 2, we talked about the importance of belonging to a group for our physical and our psychological survival. Healthy, stable groups provide support, safety, nurturing, and loving guidance, which during our formative years help us develop our sense of self to include self-agency. Successful navigation throughout this process of self-discovery enables the individual to enter adulthood with a healthy sense of self-awareness and authenticity, in other words, a stable and satisfying sense of self. But adolescence is particularly a vulnerable time when social rejection leads to feelings of shame, worthlessness, and inferiority. On one hand, when a youth's need for belonging to a group is satisfied, it builds a sense of security, which helps them develop empathy for others and moral behaviors. Conversely, when this need is unmet, the resultant insecurity can lead to anxiety, depression, jealousy, anger, and even violence. Let that sink in. And without self-agency, we may tend to perceive ourselves as having no control over bad events, which can lead to learned helplessness, resulting in resignation and even apathy. In other words, we perceive ourselves as the helpless victim rather than the author of our own life and in control of our own internal environment, such as our thoughts, our emotions, and then our outward behaviors. There is another poor outcome here worth exploring, and I believe many of you will relate to this in the context of some of our, shall I say, ultra-preemie loved ones. Again, part of what constitutes a healthy sense of self is being flexible enough to adapt our outer behavior appropriately to a variety of group contexts. But our core sense of self remains intact and constant. When individuals in a group share negative experiences, think persecution, well, this can lead to a phenomenon known as identity fusion, which describes losing one's sense of personal identity and boundaries to a group. There is a deep-seated, visceral sense of unity and oneness with a group and its members, along with a sense of group-related invulnerability. This drives individuals toward actions that benefit the group, even at personal cost, and at the cost of others who've been victimized within the group. Paradoxically, ostracism can even deepen fusion with a group, because the individual now sees two choices. They must either withdraw or they must overcompensate to reestablish and reaffirm their identity and place within the group. Now, identity fusion is most understood in the context of acts of violence associated with extremism. But we're dealing with a more subtle form of identity fusion where children and spouses are sacrificed, members are severely shunned, at times leading to their ultimate demise, and where billions of people are to be executed at the hands of 9 strong leaders, except for this one little special chosen group. And you can see how when the individual's beliefs are questioned, they feel personally attacked, defensive, and they can even lash out because they feel that their very identity is being attacked. So let's go back to our original topic, the self. In episode 3, I talked about authoritarianism, and I used the illustration of being alone on an island. That if there's no one there to tiptoe around the individual that's holding power, well, that power base dissipates. But it also begs the question, without social groups, culture, and all of these elements that coalesce to form one sense of self, well, who are you? Now, in the field of psychology, the subject of self is the most researched, and researchers are ever curious to locate what part of the human brain holds the seat of our sense of self. But today we're going to look at the 2 hemispheres of the brain and their role in how we form our sense of being. And yes, I'm talking to both of you. You see, your brain lives in darkness. It has no contact with the outer world. It constructs reality of what's out there based on its interpretation of electrical signals carried to your brain by your 5 sensory organs. Now, the right and left hemispheres of our brain process information very differently. In fact, they can operate independently. They have different thoughts, values, priorities, abilities, memories, emotions, and even personalities. Now, before you say that's been debunked, well, yes and no. The notion that either hemisphere is entirely responsible for any one process is indeed an oversimplification. The brain is highly interconnected and interdependent. What we're speaking of here is relative dominance, that either hemisphere is more dominant than the other in a variety of aspects. And this is scientifically proven using functional MRI scans and in studies with split brain patients, where the 2 hemispheres have been severed. Now, the right hemisphere acts mainly as a synthesizer. It learns through body movement. All the information in the form of energy from the outside world, it streams through our 5 senses, and it is processed to form a whole picture of the present moment. It is tuned in with reality as it truly is, in the here and now. It lives in the present moment, taking everything in unfiltered. The right hemisphere is dominant regarding social processes, such as understanding the emotions of others, and importantly, the right hemisphere is predominantly where we experience empathy. The left brain controls most everyday activities. It operates analytically and methodically, like a computer process, gathering information to organize into sequential order. It operates in a linear fashion. It selects details from the present moment, and it looks for patterns which it then categorizes by associating with what has already been learned from the past to create a narrative by projecting imagined possibilities into the future. The left hemisphere analyzes information to find deeper meaning, and it uses language to attach labels. It constructs a sense of reality, and it seeks to understand where one fits into the external world, forming a sense of self in the context of that reality. It is our internal dialogue or mental chatter that says, I am a separate, individual self, completely unique and different from everyone else. But what happens when we operate too much in our left hemisphere? Well, we become self-absorbed, controlling, manipulating, and obsessed with authority, status, and with following rules, the letter rather than the spirit of the law. We become judgmental, criticizing others based on rigid patterns that we've learned, and focus on our differences rather than what unites us, separating ourselves and others from the whole. We also become very literal and rigid without the flexibility needed to appreciate others' perspectives and to grasp social nuances, which leads to misunderstandings and defensiveness over being right. And we become less empathetic of others and their emotions. Instead, we become detached and obsessed with our own uniqueness, our self-importance, and our specialness. Now, generally speaking, this is what is referred to as the ego. Left unchecked, it becomes a narcissistic god in its own right and unto itself. And how do we end up living predominantly in our left hemisphere? Well, much of this happens in childhood. We, as parents, we tend to prioritize a baby's independence to self-soothe over the nearly constant nurturing touch and responsiveness they need in the first 3 years to develop their right brain. We dismiss children's emotions so that they cannot develop, express, nor trust them. We expose them to frightening media, which activates their self-protective mechanisms. We send them to school from an early age to focus on left brain training, and we fail to adequately provide them self-directed playtime where they can live in the present moment, which nourishes the right brain. Now, interestingly and importantly, studies suggest that the right hemisphere of our brain has a major role in our ongoing sense of being oneself, but it does so differently from the left. Whereas the left sees itself as separate, the right hemisphere sees itself as part of the whole, connected with everything and everyone. It experiences transcendence, gratitude, a feeling of oneness, tranquility, and bliss. It simply and authentically exists as I am. Now, the brain's two hemispheres are completely separate structures, and they're joined by a thick band of fibrous tissue called the corpus callosum. This is the highway where information is communicated and transferred between hemispheres. It filters all the information from the right hemisphere so that the left hemisphere can extract only what it needs to process what you call your reality, and to navigate that reality as an individual being. And this is crucial to survival because without this process, you wouldn't be able to cross the street. You'd be too overwhelmed by all the stimuli. So we do need to utilize our intellectual skills from our left brain. So what can we do? Well, I first need to state that this does not take the place of clinical and pharmacological therapies. If you are in crisis, please use conventional wisdom and reach out for help. This is intended to be educative, but note too that the concepts I'm about to introduce today are used in clinical settings to augment therapy, and quite effectively so. I mentioned in our first episode my discovery that biopsychology and Eastern philosophy were surprisingly compatible with one another. What if I told you there was a simple exercise you can do by choice to strengthen the connection between your two hemispheres so that you can live more in your right brain and experience this transcendence, peace, and bliss, this awe and oneness with all life? What I'm talking about today, folks, is meditation. And this involves a shift in one's consciousness to a state of being that's highly aware and focused while reducing distracting influences. It involves accepting one's thoughts in a non-judgmental way. Meditation produces feelings of relaxation and happiness as a result of being more aware of the present moment and less attentive to the stories and the noise in our head. It also reduces blood pressure, slows heart and breathing rates, and decreases anxiety by increasing activity in the part of our central nervous system that quiets our stress response, our fight or flight response. It helps us to zoom out from our ego's inner narratives, our attachment to labels and material pleasures, so that we can live in the present and increase our sense of purpose in life. Meditation causes positive changes to brain structures. It affects both hemispheres, and with time and practice, increases the density and connectivity of the corpus callosum, meaning more integration, and an increase in controlling one's mental fluctuations. In studies involving work-related stress, comparing mindfulness meditation to physical exercise, the greatest effect was achieved when combining these two approaches, but mindfulness meditation had the greatest overall impact, with benefits that sustained for 6 months beyond the 5-week study. Improvements included better coping capacity, concentration, decision-making, experiencing enjoyment, and overall well-being. And these changes in attention, awareness, and emotion are observable at the neurobiological level, demonstrating the brain's remarkable ability to rewire itself. It helps the individual detach from ruminative thinking and negative automatic thoughts and feelings by learning self-regulation of attention and non-judgmental observation of one's own inward experience. In fact, compared to antidepressants, studies have found that there were less relapse rates of depression. And again, this is confirmed by functional MRI scans. Now, if you feel that you simply can't sit still, at least not yet, yoga is another form of meditation that incorporates core elements of both physical exercise and mindfulness meditation. It involves focused attention on harmonizing one's breathing with the flow of body movements and postures. It develops flexibility and core strength, lowers blood pressure, calms the stress response cycle, and helps to reverse inflammatory responses, which is confirmed by saliva samples. It increases focus and teaches self-discipline and how to be in the moment without the mental clutter and distractions of everyday life. It endows the practitioner with the ability to take a step back, suspend judgment, and let go of reactive emotions. Folks, these are powerful tools in preventing, managing, and decreasing stress and anxiety. They can also be used in conjunction with conventional therapies such as cognitive behavioral therapy, as well as medication. The power is placed with the individual to claim agency over one's psychological and physiological health. But just like physical exercise, it takes practice and persistence to really begin to experience results. But know that the results will come, because this is how your brain is designed. In our prior episode, I showed you a quote by Morgan Freeman, and I want to read that to you again. Self-control is strength. Calmness is mastery. You have to get to a point where your mood doesn't shift based on the insignificant actions of others. Don't allow others to control the direction of your life. Don't allow your emotions to overpower your intelligence. Now, I said to you that this is your power, but I didn't say how to achieve it. Meditation is an extraordinary way to claim that power, your self-agency, to let go of old subconscious attitudes and patterns of thinking and behavior that are difficult to change and don't serve you. It is a remarkable means to transcend the ego and choose responses rather than merely reacting to your life situations, your surroundings, and your relationships. I'm going to include a TED Talks presentation by a Harvard neuroanatomist, Jill Bolt Taylor. At age 37, she suffered a severe stroke that all but incapacitated her left hemisphere, and yet she describes it almost tearfully as the greatest gift because she was able to experience life from her right hemisphere, the ecstasy and pure joy that we are all capable of. And she made it her mission to share her experience with the world. I do hope that you will watch it. Look, folks, you've made it here to this channel, Fixing My Faith, perhaps because you've decided that religion as an institution has been used by abusive authoritarian leaders to exert control over individuals and societies. Please know that I'm not disregarding the good that religion has to offer. Education, charitable outreach programs, and cohesion within communities. Many find comfort in fellowship and closeness to their God or higher power. But religious dogma may have frightened you away from these ancient practices by labeling them as spiritistic. And yet, science has proven that your brain is designed to process information in such a way that you can live with a sense of transcendence and bliss. I want to build a fire under your feet. Yes, we really do create our own realities. And if you understood what your brain is capable of, it would become apparent to you that you indeed possess the capacity for self-agency, and that you have, as I stated in our very first episode, everything within you needed to be whole and well. Don't let self-appointed religious leaders or anyone take that away from you by telling you otherwise, nor by making you too afraid to take charge of your life. Get to know who you are, the real you. I wish you all a very good life. Be well, and until next time, take good care. Bye for now.